Welcome to another episode of B2B Marketing Futures. Today we are diving into a topic that's gaining traction in modern marketing teams, project marketing. With us are three great guests who bring deep experience in marketing operations, demand generation, and cross-functional campaign execution. And in this episode, we'll explore what project marketing really means, why it's emerging as a key discipline, and how tools, structure, and even the idea of a marketing PMO could reshape how campaigns get delivered. And before we get into the discussion, I'd love for each of you to introduce yourselves. Maybe Alex, would you like to start?
Sure. I am Alex Long. I am a senior marketing operations manager at a tech company. I've been doing this for closing in on 10 years, which seems kind of crazy. But yeah, I focus a lot on especially technical operations and integrations, all that kind of fun stuff.
Thank you so much. Raven.
Hello there, my name is Raven McFarlane. I am a marketing automation manager for a company that provides, to kind of simplify it, PDF markup software for architects, construction workers, and engineers. I've been in the marketing operations space for just a little under 10 years, primarily focused on campaign execution and project management.
Welcome. And Jacqueline.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Jacqueline Murphy. I'm a marketing campaigns manager for a legal technology company based out of Chicago. Unlike Alex and Raven, my job, while is focusing on the campaign execution side, I, like a lot of people in their careers, their titles will kind of stay within one space potentially, but their roles really expand quite a bit. So I've had the privilege of working within our project management tools, working across different functionally to make sure that our projects are getting across the finish line.
Awesome. Thank you so much for those great introductions. Let's kick things off with the big question. What does project marketing mean to you, and why is it becoming more important today?
Yeah, so for me, project marketing is all about making sure that everybody gets what they need and it gets done in the most timely fashion possible. I'm a big fan of smarter, not harder, and I feel project marketing makes that a lot easier for everybody. We're all focused on these big campaigns, and there's so many different channels, and each team within marketing is usually focused on their own aspect of marketing. Demand gen has their priorities, product marketing, customer marketing, they all have their own priorities. But when we can work together, especially when it comes to stuff that's an overarching theme for our campaigns, that really allows us to, work together better and just have an overall easier time getting our campaigns into market.
No, I totally agree with you, Alex. I think being in a marketing space, there's just so many moving pieces. Whenever you're running so many campaigns, you're running different initiatives, and especially when we talk about uh, demand gen or just getting things across the finish line, there's a lot of functions and pieces, and especially the bigger your team, the more important it becomes to have a tool that can really kind of help you guide that and keep that all in order. Obviously, depending on the size of your team, you can totally do it without it. And you can kind of continue to just make sure that people are keeping track of their own to-do lists. But once you get to a certain space, I think it becomes very important to grab a tool or get something that's going to help keep everything in line, especially when you're managing a lot of other people.
Yeah, and to build off of that, I think it's important to view that sort of as a trajectory. You don't start off in that advanced tier where you have all of the tools and all of the people and all of the processes. You slowly build that over time, and you build that alignment and those partnerships internally over time as your business needs evolve too, emphasizing the importance of project marketing.
Completely agree.
Yeah, definitely agree. And Alex, I have a question because you mentioned the idea of putting everything together in one place, right? Because you have product, you have demand generation. And I would love to know what's your view on the role of marketing ops in bringing structure? Is marketing ops bringing this project management structure into the whole marketing department?
I think marketing ops tends to focus on a more project management workflow naturally, just because of the nature of some of our projects, especially outside of campaign management. But we obviously will bring the tools and we'll help set up the tools and make sure everything's working. My company, we use Asana, and marketing ops is responsible for making sure Asana keeps doing what it's doing, keep the lights on there, but our teams are responsible for managing their own projects through Asana. I think marketing ops tends to be the one who comes and says, hey, I need you guys to have some sort of coordinated plan, because I'm hearing from demand gen, I'm hearing from customer marketing, I'm hearing from product marketing, and you have all these overlapping pieces, but people aren't talking to each other. And so rather than having to duplicate efforts or having, all of these discordant conversations happening at the same time, if we bring people together, we're stronger together, not to be too cliched, but we're better when we come together and we can actually coordinate things. I'll even hear from somebody saying, just as an example, demand gen will come to me and say, oh, I had this white paper that was going out or a blog post that was going live, and I had this whole email plan for it, and it was going to go out later in the week, and then social media went ahead and posted it, and now I've lost all this traction for my email, and I've done all this work that I'm basically going to have to scrap. But if we had a project plan together, that never would have happened. It's just a way for us to coordinate together. And even when it comes down to like content marketing, having this foresight of, here's what content marketing is working on. How can we leverage that within our campaigns? How can we roll up to a bigger campaign theme if that's the case? Or is it, a bunch of product related releases that we want to communicate, tie into use cases and things like that? It really, I think, is marketing ops who pushes for that a lot, because we are almost a shared service in a way within marketing, in the same way that HR is a shared service across an entire organization. We see a lot of what's going on that maybe other people are not seeing from the other teams.
Yeah, it's very clear to me why it's so important to have this unified view of all the campaigns and everything, how marketing is handling all different objectives and structures. So let's move from the why to the how. So campaign execution often breaks down, whether it's missed handoffs, unclear ownership, or rushed briefs. So I love your take on what are the most common execution pitfalls and how can project marketing help prevent them?
So, in my experience, both in my current role and my previous role as a consultant, I think the most common pitfalls I've seen when it comes to not just campaign execution, but new integration execution, go-to-market execution altogether, is one, that upfront alignment across stakeholders, having a shared understanding of your organizational structure and then the goals of those teams. What product marketing may be working towards in Q1 is not what customer retention is working towards in Q1. However, there may be some overlapping opportunities to bring some campaigns to market. So having a good understanding of the org structure and their goals, and identifying the correct stakeholders and building relationships with them, not just coming to them when you need something of, I need to get this done, but understanding how your baton pass also helps them meet their goal. Next to that is the actual how of the implementation. Do you have a defined process across the teams? Do people clearly understand where their role ends and their team member's role begins? Do you have established service level agreements on how much time each team needs to complete their part of the task? And do you have a shared understanding of what items they need to complete their part of the task? I think this part, the communication, proactive communication, the soft skills, not the technical skills, ultimately what land, especially on the campaign ops side, end up with, as Alex described, untimely execution, or, and sometimes also leading to poor performance. So kind of keep that.
Yeah, and Raven, you mentioned in our briefing call that about Slack becoming a default for urgent tasks. What's the risk there?
Yeah, so similar to that scenario of, hey, I have this beautiful campaign, I've got an email plan to go with it, and hey, I know that Raven is the person responsible for helping bring that campaign to life in my region, so I'm just going to reach out to her because I know she understands my needs and I know she understands the timeline and maybe the challenges I'm working against. And while that relationship is appreciated and it should continue to be established, in my opinion, I think it's important to remind that stakeholder of, I also have that same to-do list that doesn't necessarily overlap with yours. And the forms and the process and the agreements that we created help ensure that I can meet you on the deliverable that you're asking for, while also still honoring the deliverables I've offered to other team members. So it's a bit of that, it's that relationship management and also sort of like empathy and compassion, right? And setting expectations up front. And so when that Slack message comes in, I mean, to just be totally transparent, am I oh, yay, great? No, of course not, right? This is going to take time you got to send that message. You got to do the conversation. It's not ideal, but it is an opportunity, right? To help somebody else understand what you need to get to the next step. How you solve for that though, within different org structures and different timelines is That's interesting. I'm really interested to hear from Alex and Jacqueline some of their experiences on how they've solved for some of these scenarios, especially in the enterprise level where you have, I mean, even the executives reaching out to you to say, hey, this is the priority today, and how we kind of marry that more closely to process and project management.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate you saying that too, Raven, because when I see what I hear is just a lack of a central source of truth when we're looking at these. Someone can reach out through Slack, but that might not be the process. Having a process in mind that kind of keeps everything in line is really what's going to help make sure that people know where to go when they're looking for something, or know who to talk to when something arises or something, an issue comes up, right? And having the alignment on ownership, on timelines, on a structure in place. I know that our company relies off of SOPs. And some of the biggest things when you have new people joining a team, making sure that it's not just changing with the new team members, but you're kind of being able to stay consistent on that and preventing those last minute fire drills or missed handoffs that can often happen when that happens.
Completely agree with you both. And in that vein, it goes down to iteration. I was at actually a conference last week in San Francisco, and the biggest thing I kept hearing was we have to iterate, and we have to iterate faster. When you have a project plan in place that's just a template you go back to, it allows you to iterate. It allows you to go faster because there is that level set of what the expectations are. And it's not that you can't pivot when you need to. Maybe there's some big world event that happened. Like if we go back to when the pandemic first started, everybody had to pivot real fast. It's not going to stop you from doing that, but it is going to give you a structure, and maybe your timeline is compressed, but you still have to get all those things done in order to launch a webinar, for instance. And if you have that project plan in place as a template, then you know exactly what steps need to happen, what order they need to happen in, who's going to be responsible for it, and you can move that much faster rather than having to round everybody up and say, okay, red alert, this is what we need to get done.
Love templatization, refining and optimizing template with business needs. Have either of you found a cadence or a structure that has worked for you? Because the scenario I've found myself in often is we've got a template, it works for a hot minute, and now we have to revisit. But the number of stakeholders involved, that takes time that we don't have. Yeah, so how have either of you handled that?
I'll let you go first, Jacqueline.
Man, I was hoping you go first, Alex. No, I think that, I mean, with time, things are going to change. You can't just stick to a plan always and expect when new team members come in that to some extent everything is just going to work smoothly. And even so, like sometimes you create a process and then you kind of just start to find the little cracks in it that just maybe don't make it quite as efficient as it needs to be. And I think that that's where having a lead or having different people where you can kind of touch base with those throughout time to kind of continue just making sure that things are on track and this feels like a good flow. I think it's hard to weigh between the, well, it's working, let's, or it's not working, like, let's change it, or all these small things in the sake of efficiency. And then also saying, well, if it's not broke, don't fix it, kind of finding the balance between that is really hard. And I think that there's no right answer when you come down to it. It kind of really has to be what works well with your team and what you have the capacity for.
Yeah, I completely agree. And this is not to say that my team, my company, we have it down pat, because we absolutely do not. But I do think that having flexible templates is helpful, just knowing that these are like the general steps and you need to be able to adjust. I do think revisiting, but this is where I think like having an actual project manager who doesn't sit within any specific team as far as like the campaigns types of teams go, who's focused on the big picture, really helps, because that person can be responsible for the template for the project plans, and then they can weigh in and say, okay, I'm hearing from so and so that this isn't working from them, but other people are saying that this is working. How do we accommodate? How do we adjust? How do we make this work? And when you do, like you guys were saying, both of you bring in new team members, having a trading cadence, and this is something I'm actually seeing a lot online right now, is just how companies have moved away from having these full training programs when somebody onboards. At my company, we actually have a training program, but it's all focused on our product, which is important. Absolutely. When you join a company, you need to learn about what your company is doing, what you're selling, like what is your mission statement. But having one within the individual departments, it can be harder to come by because we're all so busy. We're all doing so many things. But again, that's where kind of having a PMO, project manager, come in. They can really lead that charge of, hey, this is what our team, the high level marketing team, this is what our process looks like. This is where you can fit in. And then keep those lines of communication open, like you were both saying, is really important.
That's such an excellent point, too, as we continue to receive feedback about the nature of the marketing operations role and how we need to spend more time on strategic items and not execution. This is a great opportunity to take that kind of, like we talked about at the start of the call, this role we inherently take on and put it somewhere where it provides more value to the organization. So I appreciate that perspective.
Yeah, and I'm always telling people marketing ops is a strategic partner. We're not just a functional doer. We can come in and tell you this is what we can do to help you. This we can make your life easier. We can help you expand the reach of this campaign. You just have to talk to us. Ask the questions ahead of time. I don't mind questions. Ask me all the questions you want. There's never a stupid question if you're trying to learn something. Yeah, but exactly. When you have a project manager who's overseeing, who's not connected to these groups, again, as like another shared service type of situation, they can kind of, hate to use the word force, but kind of encourage that collaboration earlier on in the process.
Yeah, and is marketing ops the one pushing for a formal role of a PMO in your organizations?
I mean, I'm the one pushing in my organization, and I am in ops. Yes, to an extent, I think so. But I think that boils down to tech stacks are growing. Just in the last 3 years I've been at my current company, our tech stack has grown exponentially, it feels like. And it's a lot of different tools that we're supporting. Yes, we can be strategic partners and yes, we can work together, but ops teams are also a limited resource because we have so many other things we're overseeing. We can't just be relied upon to project manage something, or you need a much bigger ops team in order to project manage because you can't support as much of the other stuff that you're doing. And people tend to forget, like, marketing operations is many, many things. It's not just campaign operations. There's data management, there's integrations, there's all sorts of stuff that comes into it. And, we're trying to maintain privacy compliance even. People forget about that stuff. And so that's why pushing that into a new role where the responsibility lies on that person to project manage, or that if you're lucky enough to get multiple project managers, is really kind of fundamental in that it allows each group to do what their actual remit is without having to just step up and do that extra thing, because they may not have the bandwidth to actually do that. And in most cases, I find they don't have the bandwidth.
And Raven, you raised in previous calls the importance of education around data, privacy, and execution. Could PMO help?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As Alex mentioned, as somebody who has that high level overview of what's going to market with which audiences and what tactics are being used, they'll be able to kind of step back and kind of act as that sort of sanity check of, are we giving people the option to opt in to cookie tracking? Are we giving people the option to request their data to be forgotten, right? These GDPR types of concepts. Do our marketers have a solid understanding? Are marketers aware that there is specific privacy regulation for folks in California versus maybe someone like myself living in Wisconsin, right? And that we do need to be aware and give our folks, they can go back and ask those questions. They may not be the one who has the answer to them, but they at least can help ask the question to start that conversation to get those wheels turning.
Yeah. And Jacqueline, you implemented ClickUp globally. Could you tell us what worked and what didn't?
Yeah, absolutely. So with my team, we really needed a project management tool that would work well for us. I know Alex mentioned she used Asana. We were previously using Asana, and just for the way that our team was structured and the way it was working, it wasn't necessarily efficient for the directions that how we kind of worked with our project load. And so finding a tool that potentially that we could work across with different departments that maybe already use some tools, or tools that would really be able to, for me as a manager, be able to see what my team is working on and what are areas that they may either have more capacity to take on more projects, or what is areas that, hey, they're already overloaded. Let's try to alleviate some of that. Is just visibility from a high level perspective that I know that I really needed. And rolling that out, I know that while my team, I was working as that operations side of things, creating it. But now that we have even more people on my team working in operations, that's something that they have the capabilities and the knowledge and the almost, I think, to work in operations, you have to be able to see different patterns and how are things working and what is the inside, what does the guts look like of this tool and how do we make it really work efficiently across the board. And so while I was working on that and using and connecting different tools like Zapier into forms so that the right people could submit when they needed a new sheet for a sales team member, or when somebody needs something, being able to have one centralized place that whoever had the capacity to work on it, we could grab it and assign it and keep it moving down a structure that would really work well for our team. But it definitely is something that you need to be able to create that structure and create something ahead of time. And once we had it in place, we're still continuing to adjust here and there, but we didn't need to reinvent the wheel every time, which is great.
Yeah.
I'm our company's currently using Asana. We went back to Asana. We kind of say we're trying to figure out what we need to do and how we need to do it. That said, as somebody who's from Asana and now in ClickUp, what are some of like the advantages that you're seeing from that transition? Specifically, are there any, like features within ClickUp, for example, that provide value to your process that maybe Asana didn't or wasn't able to at the time?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think with us, some of the biggest things is being able to have a campaign with a deadline and be able to work backwards from that and having that work flip through. I know within Asana, at least in my experience, and maybe there's just different views that my team wasn't able to access or work with. But for us, having a high level dashboard of what all of our team members are working on, being able to break it down by campaign, subtasks, further subtasks underneath those with checklists, with different moving parts, and being able to look at all of that at one time with all of the team members for one team, and having some people be able to create their own views of how they kind of prefer it or like to see it was really helpful. For us, just Asana was a little bit structured very much by this project, now this project, now this project, which works well for some teams, but just for the way that we were working, we needed to have a very high level view of all of it at one time in order to report back on some of those things. So I won't say that ClickUp is perfect by any means. I've seen a lot of things that I would love to see. I used to work on Monday.com and I really liked that tool a lot. And so but no tool is really perfect, but for us, it's been working fairly well so far.
Yeah, that's definitely a struggle I have is I look at all these tools and I hear complaints about Asana, but I'm also like, well, we could move to another tool, but then nobody likes those tools either. And so you really have to find something that's going to be the best you can get to work with how your team works. Exactly what you were saying, Jackie. And it's finding that new technology and sometimes also moving to a new technology where you're able to set everything up fresh, where you have time to like lay that groundwork can be really revitalizing for a project management process. Just in that now you've got people who everybody's on the same playing field because they don't have the bad habits they learned from the old tool, right? And so you're able to bring them in and encourage everybody to follow these new processes that you're designing. So sometimes even just that change to a new tool can be really beneficial.
I'm glad that you mentioned that because to say it makes me miss some of the consulting days where you got to play around with those different tools and you got to just kind of figure out, what mix of organization and function would be best for that team or that groups of teams. Now I find in the role that I'm in now, we're so cross-functional and we do have our goals. Each team, we have our own KPIs, which then lead into overarching KPIs, right? It's the idea to help us all kind of continue to collaborate. However, the way that's done is different between each team. So from the marketing ops being that service role, I can find myself in 3 different tools in a day. And it's like, who saw? How do we create some alignment with this again that isn't through Slack or Teams, that's documented in a place that people all have access to it, even our new hires, without having to request it? Those types of things, I think, is what I find myself in that daily struggle where it's like, I wish there was one project management tool that had all of the little bits and pieces that I needed from each one to help solve for those cross-functional sort of requirements.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because sorry, go ahead, Alex.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, I just find it so interesting because there's always tools that are also continuing to evolve too. I definitely worked in a couple of platforms where I'm like, wow, I really wish they had this feature. And then move a company. And then now they're like, oh, we do this all the time. I go, where did this come from? Why isn't it here when I was just working with my last company or whatever was happening? So it's nice too that as time evolves, as technology continues to evolve, that a lot of these tools that we're kind of using to manage are also evolving at the same time.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And that is, I love that you said that. And then Raven, you also said you get to play around with all these different tools because sometimes it's like, if I just had this piece from this tool and that piece from that tool, it would work together. And then you run into tools like Notion where you can really make it do anything. But the problem is you can make it do anything. And so you have to build it from scratch. So, there's those tools that have a lot of built-in structure, which I think are great, especially for teams who don't have a lot of resources to dedicate to building this stuff out. And then if you do have a little bit more resource, or maybe you have a slow season in your sector where, maybe if you're an education sector and you have that slow summer period, you can really spend some time building something out that's going to work for you, specifically in a tool that like a Notion, for instance, that has a lot more capabilities. But I'm even seeing Slack. I don't know if you guys have tried or if you have it enabled for your company, the Slack canvases. They have these project management templates. And I've even proposed, like, well, if I can't get people to use Asana properly, then maybe we go where they're living already in Slack and we create these channels. It doesn't help with some of the stuff, like you were saying, Jackie, with reporting and stuff like that, but it at least gets people collaborating and working together. And then, that can even potentially be used as a stepping stone to a bigger tool, especially for companies who don't already have a project management tool.
What could a PMO do for an organization? Something that you can't achieve with the current platforms or with maybe with your marketing ops. What's something different that you can bring if your company hires a fully dedicated PMO?
Excellent question. So there's so many things that project management can be applied to, right? I mean, that's why so many different companies, so many teams within different companies use project management tools, have project managers doing different tasks. And that can also be applied to just internal stuff that you have to do because you're part of a team within a part of a larger organization. So an example for my team and our use cases might be managing contracts. In our company, vendor contracts for marketing make up about 60% of all vendor contracts for the entire organization, because you've got to think about it. It's not just your technology contracts, it's event contracts. It's, oh, you're hosting this event, you need the venue, you need the caterer, you need the photographer, you need X, Y, Z. And those all often have their own individual contracts. And that's a process you have to go through. Legal has to review them. You have to work with accounting and all of that stuff. And so having that as part of the remit for a PMO, it would be really helpful. Most of our teams have a corporate credit card, but we have to reconcile that and track the receipts. And, in my company, we have one person who's the primary user of a credit card because she's out at a lot of different events. And it's fallen to her to track all those receipts. That's been added on to her job. She's an event marketer. She should be doing event marketing. She shouldn't have to go chase receipts from people who are also using that same team credit card. And if we had a PMO, that's part of the remit. So I see it as not just campaign project management, but also a way to collect all these disparate pieces that are kind of keeping people from doing like what their real job is, what their title says they do, or, things like that. I think all of us have said, like, we kind of, our titles and our roles are what they are, but they bleed out into these other areas because those things just need to get done. But if you bring one person in or one team in a PMO to handle a lot of that stuff, it will ease up a lot of the lift from other people who are just trying to do whatever it is that they're good at. And I always say, like, in marketing ops, my role is to make it so that marketers can do marketing and they don't have to worry about the technology to do that marketing. And this kind of goes in that same vein. Take the stuff that drives people nuts, that they're spending time on because they have to, that they don't necessarily need to be the person doing that. Somebody needs to do it, but it doesn't have to be them. And if you collect all those things, it just gives even more weight to having a PMO.
Definitely. Well, all right. So thank you so much for those amazing insights. We've covered a lot today, from defining project marketing and surfacing real world challenges to debating whether it's time for a PMO. Before we close, I'd love to hear any thoughts or advice you'd give to marketers struggling with campaign chaos and looking for more structure. What's one thing they should start doing tomorrow?
Happy to jump in here. One thing I think that they can start doing is asking themselves, what are the items that I feel that I'm spending too much time on? and who within my team has tools or goals or plans that can help me spend less time on that. So talking to the ops side of the house, talking to the sales side of the house, having the conversation, asking yourself, what can I do differently, to then bring that to your team member who can then help you meet you at that solution. Don't look at it from, I have a tool, this tool can do this thing and this tool is going to solve my problem. Sure, maybe for the short term, but long term, it will create 3x more problems for you as you need someone to maintain and upkeep what you've now stood up. Instead, define your problem and allow you to pull in your team members to help you understand what your solutions could look like.
Completely agree. Communication is so important, I think, just foundationally to any relationship, including working relationships. Talk to people. Ask questions. I mean, people shouldn't be afraid to ask a question. If you are one of those people who's maybe quieter, find somebody you trust in a role who can help you get those answers. Maybe they don't always have the answer, but you can open the discussion and they can help you find those answers. And if you're in a position where you're trying to build a business case, either for a project management tool or a project management role within marketing, sometimes the best evidence is real world evidence. And yes, this adds more to your plate, but tracking how much time you're spending coordinating stuff with other teams that could have been done in a much more cohesive fashion using a tool, or other time that you're spending on stuff that has to get done that is not really part of what your role is supposed to be doing necessarily. Like I said, all those types of things that we all just have to do because we're entities within a larger organization. Track that amount of time that you're spending and, kind of explain like to your stakeholders, I spent X amount of time in the last 30 days doing all of these different things. I could have spent that time doing these other things to help other stuff be bigger, better, and all the good stuff. So communication, and then just taking notes. And it's not always the easy thing to do. It's something I struggle with, is making sure I'm tracking that stuff. But take your notes, get your paper trail, even if that's just in your own Slack note to yourself. Keep track of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to both of your points, communication is so vital for this. So making sure that you can kind of create what is just the direction, what is the SOP, what is the direction that we're going to do, and how should people stick to it, and just having those quick reminders. Raven, I know you talked about that earlier, to kind of make sure that we're all staying on track and that people know what we're supposed to be doing when we kind of are going about these projects or campaigns or whatever your team kind of runs. I always say, for someone who's in this space kind of starting to do more project management or project marketing, is start small, build around real problems, make sure that you're talking to not just the people in the mix, but also talk to leaders, talk to everyone and kind of see where they are. And then creating spaces where people can really communicate when they see bottlenecks, when they see spaces when things just aren't really working or something feels inefficient, writing that down and putting that somewhere so that whoever is creating those spaces or really managing that, whether it's a PMO or someone in operations or a team lead or whatever the case may be, that they can stay on top of it and kind of make those adjustments so that they can have flexible structures and continue to adjust as things are kind of coming up.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Alex, Jacqueline, and Raven. It's been a great conversation. And thank you to our listeners. If you enjoyed this, please be sure to subscribe and share. And see you next time on B2B Marketing Futures. Thank you so much.